You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, Private Members Club. And for the next 45 minutes, we're going to be talking about the day after Sue, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
And I'm Ian.
And I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg's chimney sweep.
Are you Jacob Rees-Mogg's chimney sweep? Can you afford your services anymore?
I'm dirty.
No Christmas bonus for you now.
He'll need me more now. He'll be at home more.
Or maybe. He'd probably just be on the telly more on GB News, right?
I was just hearing about his tongue sandwich.
Tongue sandwich?
Apparently his nanny...
Labour Party rumours.
No, apparently it was on a podcast. Maybe it was even on James O'Brien. I've listened to so many things driving around today. Yeah, apparently his nanny always makes a tongue sandwich for everyone for the count, and so Jacob Rees-Mogg, is here because the smell of tongue sandwich arrives. I mean, if that's not the most Victorian thing I've ever heard of, the smell of tongue. Oh, Jacob must be here with his nanny. What a freak!
I hate to think what smell was unavailable when Liz Truss was keeping everybody held up last night. But
God. Yeah.
Tongue sandwich.
Amazing. Anyway, you're in charge, JR.
It would be nice. So, but I guess this conversation, so we're here to talk about the general election, right? And what we think, I guess, but the conversation, despite the fact that Labour have got over 400 MPs, the story is not that Labour was super successful, but that the Tories collapsed, isn't it? And I guess this is kind of what we were expecting, but it really became a narrative, didn't it? And the reason it's a narrative overall, other concerns, is that Labour only got 33.7% of the... I mean, the thing is, we've still got one count left to come in, so we don't want to count our chickens, right?
Labour has a majority of 170. Why this is bad for Keir Starmer.
I'm not saying it's bad for Keir Starmer. I'm saying the conversation is not that Labour wiped everybody out with the amount of people who voted for them, but that the Tory vote collapsed to such an extent that Labour were able to get that majority with fewer than 10 million votes.
Yeah, well, it's something I wanted to talk about was the way the media is sort of spinning it negatively already. And I think it doesn't help that Labour people are like, oh, great, we've got a landslide. Let's find a reason to be unhappy about that as well.
Well, let me ask a question.
Yeah.
So we all stayed up to one degree or another last night to watch it. I've not actually been in bed since 5 o'clock yesterday morning, pretty much. But I did get a bit of a nap between sort of about 11:30 and 2:30 during the sort of quiet period. So I've had a nap. But we all stayed up to watch bits of it, if not all of it. And I've not been able to do that since the Labour victories in the sort of 90s, early 2000s, because, you can't predict when the election's going to be, so you can't choose your work days around it. So this is the first time it's worked out for me since then. And I've got to say, my overall sort of... I'll just give you a minute.
Sorry.
Are you adjusting your cabinet?
A battery alert.
Oh, really?
Came on. Typical. Sorry. It's been one of those days.
This will be on the video. And knowing my editing skills, this will be on the audio as well.
There's a new day, is it not?
It is. Oh my. Doing things at my mum's house. God damn it.
He's gone altogether now. We'll carry on without him. Oh, wow, that's fantastic. Anybody who's listening to this on the audio, you really need to watch this video.
We just had both of his Starmers on screen.
I've noticed in the tennis coverage that whenever Emma Raducanu's playing, they will just put a camera right behind her backside when she's bending forward waiting for the other player to serve. I don't know if they do that with the men. If they do with that, the men, surely they could not do that with the women. It seems to me like something that's utterly avoidable and not remotely necessary. Right, going back to what I was saying, I stayed up all night. The last time I did that was back in the sort of Blair Brown days, and back in those days, especially that first one, it was euphoria. You stayed up all night, and you were buoyed up by the joy of the vote going the way it did. This didn't feel like that at all. It felt just. I mean, obviously, clearly, it is great that the Tories finally, after 14 years, are no longer in charge of the country. That's the best news. But it didn't seem like an especially buoyant night. I don't think. So I want to find out how you guys felt about it. So I'm going to come to Matt first. Matt, did you stay up for much of it? And how did you feel about?
I stayed up until midnight and then went to bed. And I think I woke up at 5 just to make sure that,
right,
what was happening. I saw Jacob Rees-Mogg had lost his seat. Then I fell asleep again and got up at 8 and watched the highlights on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So that's sensible. I did stay up for the 97 one. I was at university. So that, and it was exciting in 97, but I was younger. The polls were less accurate at that point because we'd been burnt by the polls in 92. This time the polls were so consistent and been so consistent for so long. It was always a question of how much they were going to win by. And actually the exit poll was slightly higher than a lot of people were predicting. So it wasn't driving me through the night, but I was quite pleased to see the little individual moments of the night.
There were a few good ones. There were some bad ones as well. It felt like the exit poll predicted more seats for every party than they ended up with. So I'm not entirely sure that the people doing the maths on the exit poll weren't starting from a consideration of 750 seats rather than 650.
I think SNP go down a bit?
Oh, they collapsed, didn't they?
Yeah. So, and yeah. I mean, the Conservatives didn't do as well. Labour did quite a bit better. But it was all pretty much exit polls, and they did explain that it's impossible to do exit polls on the referendum party and the SNP.
Sure. So, well, and then the thing as well is about the exit polls is the big parties, you can pretty much guess how they're going to do from the numbers. The smaller parties, the margins are so narrow, it's hard to tell. And so they predicted, I think the exit poll said 13 for Reform, and eventually it was 5, as it turns out, because they've just had a 5th seat called not long before we started. Ian, how much did you stay up for?
I stayed up till Jacob Rees-Mogg bit the dust.
Right. That's 5 past 5?
Yeah, so 5 past 5. So that's how I went to bed. I kept going, and I was drinking as well, as I may have said in the chat. So I was drinking and
not like you aren't still drinking. We've all got video here,
Yeah, and I'm drinking again just after driving around the country all day. So I was outdoor knocking with my candidate in Mid Cheshire. This is my first time, as we'll probably talk in a bit. My first time actually being part of a campaign, which has been interesting, mostly positive. But it's another way of finding out about how the electorate vote and the decisions they come to. But so I was outdoor knocking.
Well, you better tell us before you go any further, Ian. You better tell us what party your candidate was standing for.
Oh yeah, so Labour Party, and his name is Andrew Cooper. And spoiler alert, he won quite comfortably. But it was very interesting having not just it being these are a bunch of people. It's actually, oh my God, I've got to wait up till he was declared about 4:30, I think, as well. So I didn't want to go to bed until we found out about his results. But yeah, and then a whole bunch of bad things kept happening. Like there was a whole bunch of what, from my point of view, were bad things. Like Farage won, and then there was like 3 in a row that were like the dark side were triumphing. And I was like, I can't go to bed with this happening. So I wait till a bunch of good stuff's happened, and eventually I went, right, Rees-Mogg, that's the time to go to bed. And then the first thing I heard in the morning was my wife saying, Truss is gone. So that was quite a nice bookend.
Oh, you both missed that. That was
Yeah, so I missed Truss.
wild. That was. The camera was there for about 10 minutes waiting for her to turn up. Well, not the entire 10 minutes waiting for her to turn up on the stage, but the camera was there. People were going up to the stage. They were going away again. They went up, they got on the stage. Everybody's looking around. Everybody's wondering what's going on.
I thought somebody should go up to the mic, and when I've watched it, in the catch up, somebody should have gone and just assure you that Liz Truss is not under a desk. Totally
or in
reminds
the
me
fridge.
of that moment with Penny Mordaunt in Parliament.
Oh yes.
Just having
by that stage, Penny Mordaunt could probably have made it over there from where she was, but then I suppose she wouldn't have known that was going to happen, right?
No.
All right, let's do. Okay, so I mean, but clearly we're all happy about the result. We must be happy about the result, right? The sheer numbers of it, rather than necessarily the sort of finer detail.
Yeah, well, for me, it was when the exit poll came, I kept going this, and straight away I was like, this is not like 97. 97 was euphoria. 97 was sweeping away, and we were all inspired by Tony Blair, and it was like, this is amazing, this is a change. All I saw was 13 for reform. So he very much harshed my vibe right from the beginning, because he's been harshing all our vibes for 3 decades now, whatever it is. So that just made me quite cross, and so at least it wasn't 13. And
I want to come back to them in a minute, and I want to come back to talking about the future of both the two main parties in a minute as well. So let's go through some of the bits, I suppose. Green, they got the 4 seats they were looking for. I've always found Green slightly worrying in that they're sort of agenda driven, but without checks and balances. But I guess the point with Green is they don't necessarily need checks and balances, because Green are the checks and balances. So I guess overall it's a good thing that Green have got the 4 seats they wanted, right?
But also, if you're going to be a party of ideology or a party of statement, it's best that you are sort of between 4 and 20 seats, because you get a say in Parliament, but you don't have to suck it up and do the pragmatic thing once you're in charge and actually, stick with Trident, or go to war with this country or that country.
And you don't hold so much.
You have to do. You can't not do. As there's a limit to how much the party in charge can do. That's different from the other parties in charge, because the country requires it.
Well, and the other thing being, if you're not in charge, but you've got enough seats that you hold so much sway. For example, like the Lib Dems should have been in the sort of hung parliament of 2010, then actually there's no checks and balances on you either, and you can push for agendas that you didn't necessarily ought to be pushing for, because they're minority agendas, but your position is such that you're able to put those agendas forward. And so, the Greens is a good number of seats. 4 seats means that they can't be ignored, but also it's a case of, so they have influence rather than power.
Yeah, and that was a real sort of fillip to how bad I felt about reform, getting anything, and I'm still think Farage becoming an MP is a dark stain on our history.
I'm kind of find it slightly. He doesn't want to be an MP.
He doesn't, but that's kind of not the point, is it?
And I don't think he'll be able to do much. I think there's lots of talk about Reform being the insurgent party, even if they did get X million votes. They're not. The point is, they're stuck with what they've got for 5 years. They're not going to be able to do that.
I mean, a lot of commentators have said, I'll be very surprised if all 5 of them make it through to the next election.
Because there's
being some sort of disgrace, some sort of they've got to go independent, or they've been arrested.
There's financial scrutiny as well. So Reform is a dodgy as fuck party, and now it has to be a legitimate party.
But the point with Reform, I don't think, is that they have 5 MPs and who those 5 MPs are. Although I think the voice that those 5 MPs are given just by virtue of being in Parliament is a dangerous thing. I think the point is they got 14%. They got more votes than the Lib Dems.
Yeah.
No, Matt, it's not the fact that they got more votes as numbers on a piece of paper. It's that there is a large number of people and growing number of people in this country who are moving further and further to the right.
And there's lots of talk about the percentages of these votes, but I don't think it matters because the Labour Party won. We're not in proportional representation. This is where it is for 5 years.
But I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about government. I'm talking about the public.
And we've seen what Keir Starmer's done to the Labour Party in 5 years. So now we get to see what he does to the government and the country in 5 years. And if he's as good as at doing that, then he'll bring people on side.
Yeah, that brings me to what I thought I started sort of forming right at the beginning, when it's not just been they're talking about it just being, oh, this is just an anti-Tory vote, and in Scotland a bit of an anti-SNP vote.
Yeah.
But actually, I think, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a Labour Party member, because I'm quite sceptical and I'm quite I've never been a joiner. I haven't joined very many political parties, and this is my first time campaigning, so I'm not like 100% behind Starmer. But I think he has basically made the Labour Party completely ready, and they probably would have won against quite a strong Tory party, just not as much. So the Tory party have been shit, and on the other side of the things, the Labour Party have been unbelievably disciplined.
There's
Like
a question.
even John McDonnell, no one's heard a peep out of him until they knew they'd got it over the line.
I mean, they were lucky, but all they need is to be lucky this time. 5 years is a long time. And there's also the talk of the rise of, so it's not like France. So Le Pen has, as a generational presence in France. That party has a generational presence. They've always had this sort of popularity. They've always been about to win. But it's not like in France. That's not what happens here. I mean, I'm surprised. I think this election's made me realise how variable the percentages work with the number of seats. So how you can you could be 5% off 20 but get 3 seats.
Well, did you hear Professor John Curtis say this is the least proportional result ever in UK history?
Yeah. But on the other hand, I don't care, because this is our system. This is where it is for 5 years as well. Yeah, and also, in order to get, so the reason the Lib Dems got so many seats is because they're really smart at campaigning. They campaigned in the right places. They had this sort of tacit agreement with the Labour Party. So it kind of, there's smart campaigning. Reform isn't smart campaigning, it's personality campaigning. So that Reform, I don't think, are about to suddenly take off as this massive organised party.
No, I don't think they are. I still find it profoundly depressing. Like JR was saying, like 15% of the population, and it feels like it's rising, but I don't know if it's actually there. The other argument is there's always been this rump of quite nasty people, and we've not noticed them as much because they usually just vote Tory. They're like the nastier end of the Tory party. But I was worried about them particularly because I met a lot of them literally just before the polls closed. And a lot of them were where I was in Winsford, which has never ever been Labour ever, and now has a Labour MP because it's part of a new constituency, like the salt towns of Northwich, Winsford and Middlewich. And Winsford is like, it's sort of chippy, not as leafy as everywhere else. It's very working class and angry, and always quite right wing. There's not, there's Labour there, but there's not. It's always been very right wing, working class. From what I can tell, and just a very angry place, and it went very Brexit. And I kept meeting people on the doorsteps or on the app. It would say, this person voted Labour last time, and you'd knock on the door and go, have you voted? Yes, I have. And did you vote Labour like last time? No, I fucking didn't. Would you mind telling me who you voted for? Reform. And so that was a bit of a last minute, oh shit. But then as it turned out, the candidate wasn't as worried as I was, because he'd been out for 6 weeks non-stop, and he just said, I'm quietly confident, and then he won by miles.
And it's also
but 8,000 people of these 18,000 people that voted for him, 8,000 people, I think, voted for Reform.
The Reform vote is not far off half the Labour vote.
Yeah.
But they only got 5 seats. So my point is that with the Brexit referendum, there were 52% of the country voted to leave, which was shocking at the time, and it made you feel like you were in, like, you hadn't understood your own country. But that's because the 48% that voted to Remain lost. If Remain had won, it wouldn't have mattered to me what the percentages are. I would have just thought, oh, well, at least we won. We can maybe, just carry on as we are. And that's what I feel like a bit now. I don't really care that what 13 million or 7 million or however many voted for Reform. They only got
4 and a bit million.
Yeah, they only got 5 MPs.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't
5
concerned.
years.
Yeah, it's a big.
It's left a really nasty taste in my mouth.
I'm depressed. I'm depressed by it, and I'm sad by it.
Probably not something to be that feared.
Well,
I don't know, because I think.
Well, what's going to happen? Labour's going to be in power for 5 years. That's half a decade.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. In Germany in 1933, what was going to happen? They were just going to be in power for a few years.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
in Germany,
we're talking
in Germany,
in
1933, it was a different political system again.
Yeah, but you're just not listening to what I'm saying, are you?
No, I'm listening. Well, I've heard what you're saying from other people overnight. But do you deny that Labour's going to be in power for 5 years?
No,
there's nothing that
I'm worried about what happens in the longer term.
Yeah. Well, that's why
it's something to be aware of and be. I'm always, I've always been very anti-fascist, which shouldn't be a weird thing to say, but it's always, I'm always. Some people seem to be more tolerant in getting people to realise that Reform are linked to the far right. Just doesn't seem to go over to some of my in-laws. Even they just won't hear it. It's just MSM nonsense. And all it is it's Nigel. He drinks a beer. He's just like us, and he says it how it is. And there's that rump of 10 to 15% of people.
So, but last night, the other thing is, and there is a problem. They do need to do something about it, and it's just they don't care what the problem is, and it's the optics that these people are putting in front of people. They're saying these people are the problem, and actually they're not pointing at the problem. They're not pointing at the solutions. They're just riling up support for a fascist party.
Just like Boris Johnson did when he got in with a huge majority in 2019. He lasted 3 years because once you're in Parliament and once you're looked at, then that exposes the worst sides of you.
But look at what he did to the country. He got us a barely any deal Brexit, left us with Truss, who broke the economy.
He got us Labour government to the end.
I mean, it's the fact that Lee Anderson being re-elected was one of the worst things of the night as well. I thought, he's been kicked out of the Tory party for his comments. Even they won't have him, and they'll just lose. He'll do a Gillis and just lose at the election. But no, being in Reform boosted him.
And not only that, they got 4 other MPs as well.
Yeah, so he got boosted by being in Reform, rather than you might have thought. He's nothing without the Tory party, but Rosette.
This isn't France. This isn't Germany in 1933. We're in like a parliamentary democracy with a set of 600 odd constituencies. I'm not panicking about Reform suddenly sweeping the country at any point in the next 5 years or in 5 years of election, because the Labour Party's really good at campaigning. Keir Starmer's clearly going to be really good, I think, at governing. The Conservative Party is really good at campaigning. The Lib Dems are really good at campaigning. Reform isn't that good at campaigning. They got a lot.
Yeah.
They got a lot of votes, but they got 5 seats. They don't have a broad appeal.
For a
Depends what
tiny
you call
party on their first election with no MPs, they're so bad at campaigning. They got nearly 50% of what Labour got.
Yeah, they're not bad at campaigning. I think they're very different at campaigning. And TikTok. I mean, I've worked in schools sometimes, and the schools around Cheshire that I've worked in, I would say a third of the kids, the only politician they knew was Nigel Farage, and they all shouted, Nigel, and started chanting because they all watched TikTok, and Nigel Farage is a legend.
Yeah.
Legend. He's Andrew Tate. He's legend.
And that'll fade.
I don't know if it'll fade. He's been around now for 25 years, and it's not faded yet. And he's got Brexit.
He's been the most influential politician in the country in some ways. I hate him.
Yeah,
I want him to die,
I hate him as well. But he's a bogeyman of his own creation. He goes around the country like saying how this is like Johnson has somehow created this aura of himself as this incredibly erudite like orator and this writer of books and this amazing campaigner. Johnson wasn't that good at campaigning. Johnson didn't get that many votes in the last election.
No, I think Johnson was a bit like people are saying about, Johnson, the anti-Corbyn vote benefited him quite a lot as well. So.
And nevertheless, the most damaging thing that's happened to this country in a generation is the direct cause of those two men.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
And so to say, they don't have enough seats to make a difference is just ridiculous because they didn't have any seats.
But it's the way that Parliament works. You're not going to be able to do very much in Parliament with 5 seats.
They got Brexit over the line.
You're sounding like a rabbit in headlights. You need to toughen up a bit. They're not going to be able to toughen up. They can't do Brexit again from Parliament.
Brexit happened because it was a much wider. It wasn't just Nigel Farage. He pushed it.
Yeah.
And they let him do the really racist stuff over in a safe corner.
And the legacy
so they had a sort of cordon sanitaire around him. Plausible deniability, but there was lots and lots of people wanted Brexit in the House of Commons. It wasn't just a few fuckheads from UKIP. It was half the Tory party.
It's a 50-50 referendum, which is exactly how Parliament doesn't work.
And now the rump of the angry people, because the reform vote was high. Basically, if it was the higher the Leave contingent, the higher the reform vote. So wherever the angry, ignorant people are who voted, a lot of them voted Leave. Some people I know are my friends and they voted Leave. I don't count them. It's nuanced. But generally, the angry people who probably never voted before felt left behind and voted Brexit. They're also the ones, the rump of them are now shouting that Nigel's a legend and voting for him. I wonder how much more appeal he's got.
The fact that they got 5 seats against 15% of the vote is not going to make those people any less angry or diminish the amount of them.
No, but they've. I think it was. But you needed a lot less votes this time around to get one Lib Dem MP. And I think even the Greens this time round, because when it was just Caroline Lucas, you needed the most votes to get one MP Green, and now they've got 4. I think it's 700,000 votes for one MP. I think is the figure I heard.
I think reform, and God's sake, can we stop? But Reform have 5 MPs in Parliament. They're not going to be able to do that much. This, I think, is the ceiling of their popularity. Their supporters, I reckon half their supporters, half the people that voted Reform are expecting to see Nigel Farage stood at the dispatch box and debating Keir Starmer. He's going to get one maiden speech and they might get a few questions in and there'll be a few scandals. But this is it's not it's not a movement that's going to rise in Parliament. They're not going to get suddenly get 10 MPs, 20 MPs, and if they do, it's Tory party members flipping, and they can't afford to flip that many because the Lib Dems are close behind them.
Yeah, well, I think there'll be a smaller version of the Tory party, which the Tory party purged itself. It stopped being a broad church of talent. Who, you know, you had your Rory Stewarts and people that I really had, thought were really good on one end. I might not agree with their politics, but they were good, upstanding people, the One Nation Tories, and they purged that party till it was useless, absolutely useless, full of mediocrities. And Reform are starting with the mediocrities and are only going to get worse.
And the Tory party
maybe you're right. We'll have to see what
the Tory party also purged their party pretty much of people who'd campaigned before, people who are used to campaigns. Jeremy Hunt was pretty much the only one who was a seasoned campaigner, and he won because he went back. He just stayed in his constituency.
Oh, he just went fuck the national thing, and he's never knocked on more doors than ever before.
Yeah.
Fair
enough.
The look on his face when he'd won, he was genuinely surprised.
Yeah.
Like he went, his eyes popped out. But yeah, that's probably. I really hate talking about Reform. I do feel like Nigel Farage is like taking over my life sometimes.
But that's what he wants. I mean, this is the thing. Nigel Farage builds his own demonology. He's got far more power in his ability to persuade people that he's powerful than he actually has.
Yeah, he's just a Lawrence Fox or an Andrew Tate. He's been paid money to disrupt, and he enjoys doing it, and that's what he's good at. He's Katie Hopkins. He's all manner of stupid, nasty people with no soul, and I can't stand him. But I hope you're right, Matt. But I think we should be vigilant because he represents something really grim and dark.
Well, I'm pretty sure the Labour Party the Labour Party will probably be vigilant. I don't think they're blind to the fact that Reform got X number of votes. And I doubt they'll be complacent either.
I did most of my campaigning on the internet, so digicoms as they call it, because I couldn't get out very much with kids and everything. So on the internet, it was very much just ignore Reform, they're an irrelevance for the first 2 weeks, and then suddenly it was, maybe we want to have a look at Reform. So, I don't know if things were changing in real time as the Reform threat grew. So, because right at the beginning, I got told off for wasting my time, sort of haranguing Reform people, because it's like, no, it's not a good use of your time. Right. They're not relevant. But as they built, you realised there were bots everywhere, all over these Facebook groups, which is where this election's been fought. The bots everywhere, and then there were people actual real people, but they'd set up new accounts and all manner of cyber stuff. But the people who were local, who were Reform, like I think you said, JR, they were generally expecting Nigel Farage to maybe become Prime Minister, or maybe they'd form the second party. They were so convinced, because when you're on the internet, you half believe it yourself, because you're literally going, oh my God, Zulus, thousands of them. There's literally Reform everywhere.
Well, and then it's on TikTok, the Conservatives
and it doesn't translate as much to the street, but it translated enough.
Well, I don't think the Conservatives were afraid that Reform were going to become the opposition. I think Conservatives were rightly afraid that Reform were basically going to split the vote, and that's exactly what happened. The funniest thing is the Liz Truss vote, because it was Reform and an independent candidate split the vote. Yeah, which was great. And Labour got it.
Yeah. So it was one area where was that the one with the 23-year-old sort of Gaza?
Yeah, I think Liz Truss did. She had a candidate who was billing himself as a true Tory. And they had the Reform candidate, and they had the Labour candidate, and it was just
right.
Labour won it. Yeah. I mean, it's an obvious question. What was the best moment of the night? But I don't think anybody would nominate anything other than Truss going, would they? I mean,
Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, I think
I don't like Rees-Mogg.
Nobody
Also,
likes
'cause-
Rees-Mogg, but Truss is Truss, right?
In a weird way, so I was watching Channel 4 and I just got, because I like Rory Stewart and I like Alistair Campbell's podcast, and I like Emily Maitlis. So I found myself stuck on it. And then they had a really fun bunch of guests on. And then I was a bit like, oh, Nadine Dorries is on. That puts me off big time. But I don't know if you saw it, she just was mad as a box of frogs and said awful things.
Lasted 5 minutes and I went back to the BBC.
And then she left and she never came back.
See, if I'd have known that.
So they basically just went, you're mad. This isn't the tone we were going for. It's not the Big Brother house just because it's on Channel 4. And she obviously, I mean, I wonder if they just said, you're getting paid anyway, but you're not going on TV again.
Well, the thing is, on the BBC, the guests that they had on the BBC would come in and do 15 minutes, and then they'd move on. Somebody else would come on anyway. So maybe she was only down to do the first half an hour or something anyway.
They did have a cycle of...
I think she was there to be all night. I think that was the vibe, because people were literally there all night. Kwasi Kwarteng was there after night.
I thought she came back in and out a little bit. But
then she definitely disappeared after one explosion.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought Campbell was going to get glassed.
Channel 4 were one of the winners of the election night, beyond the politics. I think they had a really smart way of presenting it, because there's been this explosion of political podcasts and news podcasts, and they kind of cherry picked from the cream of the political podcasts and news podcasts. And those people know how to be informal but informative and relaxed, and they know how to construct things, and they know how to debate, and it's there's an irreverence to it that made it much.
I'd like to look at the figures, but I kept hearing that BBC was very boring.
I think Channel 4 rose during the night, so Channel 4 was the second. Nobody watched ITV, nobody watched Sky.
As I understand
BBC and then turning over to Channel 4 over the night.
I think Channel 4 actually were third, but second in the under 35s audience.
Okay.
So BBC won, and the BBC were first in the under 35s audience. ITV was second overall, and Channel 4 was second in the under 35s, as I understand it.
That sounds right, because it was. There was occasionally I found myself going, this is making me cringe a bit because I'm old. So when the Gogglebox stuff came on, I turned off and went to a different channel. That stuff makes me want to die. Any reality TV type stuff. But
I think there's a generation and a demographic that just goes. There's a generation and a demographic that just goes to ITV for everything anyway, isn't there?
There is that, yeah. But I do generally find Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, even if you don't agree with their politics, their lived experience is fascinating.
I really like them. They both have things that irritate me, but they balance out. So the thing about Campbell that irritates me, Rory Stewart kind of balances, and then Rory Stewart's sort of sincere pomposity. Sometimes it's sincere sincerity, but sometimes it's pompous sincerity, kind of. And then Campbell punctures that.
They've hit some sort of chemical gold with the pairing of them.
Yeah. See, I much prefer Southall and Maitlis, if I'm honest.
I think I like them, but they're a different thing. They're the external commentators. So the Campbell and Stewart podcast is more like insiders kind of sharing their experience.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the three kind of political podcasts I listen to are sort of newscast, news agents, and the rest is politics. And I've been sort of cycling.
I listen to Oh God, What Now a lot as well.
Okay.
Right. I had to give one up
Maniacs.
That's informed, and the one I gave up was the rest of politics. Okay. Anyway, let us talk about the future. Let us talk first about the future for the Tories, and then let us talk about the future for Labour. Because I think we've got to at least spend a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, talking about what we think is going to happen now. Rishi Sunak, he stood down as Prime Minister, hasn't he? Are they
stood down as leader as well?
Yeah. Are they going to install somebody quickly, or are they going to take their time? Who do we think it's likely to be? Will Sunak actually stay on? He's promised to stay on as an MP. I'm not entirely sure he's likely to keep that promise. I wonder if he'll do a few months in order to sort of save face, to show willing, and then maybe
I'd put money on him. He's not going to hang around. Like, he's not a servant of the people like Theresa May, is he?
Yeah, no,
he's not going to hang around for 5 years.
You wouldn't think
having
so.
been Prime Minister, but there's millions of pounds to be made.
I guess of the people who left, the two names that sort of immediately sort of throw themselves out as not necessarily the people that they'll pick, but certainly the ones who'll be at the front of the queue to be picked, are obviously Braverman and Badenoch, right?
Yeah, and Braverman seems mad as a box of frogs. She is, and Badenoch, her speech was really good. I think she's got the chops. I don't like her. Yeah, but I think she's got the chops. I also overhear, white guys who vote Tory in the pubs in Cheshire, and there's a lot. They don't like the fact that anyone brown is leading their party. So there is that factor as well. That's one reason. Sure. I think Rishi Sunak, if he'd managed to if they'd gone for him instead of Truss, we might be looking at a very different election result if we'd never had Truss. And the Tory base wasn't racist, we might be looking at quite a different world. Because I don't like Sunak, and I think he was a terrible politician in lots of ways, but he did get stuff done. He just made a massive error as soon as he got in. He didn't stand up to Braverman. He gave her a job.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of.
The racist vote wouldn't have voted for him anyway, would they? That's part of the reason why the Tories have gone down the way they have, presumably.
Yeah. Well, as we overheard that Reform voter on the Channel 4 thing, but I've heard it lots of times. I've heard it at schools. I've heard it in the pub. They don't think.
Do you know what?
They use the P word, and they don't.
I'd forgotten that word even existed. It's been so long since I've heard it, and that was a bit of a shock to the system.
I live in Cheshire, and you hear it a lot. That's what it's called. Yeah.
I work for the Royal Mail. You would think you would hear it all the time, and it just seems to have disappeared. Or it certainly does around here, anyway.
Yeah.
What about? Well, Matt, anything more to add about the Tories or any other suggestions?
I don't think Jeremy Hunt's going to go for it, because I think he's shot his bolt. Tugendhat might from the other side, just for balance.
I don't think Hunt wants to, frankly, just on Hunt. I don't think he's interested.
I'm sort of sad. Penny Mordaunt, I think, was starting to reframe herself as being a kind of more centrist, and her performance in the debates were really good. And actually there were moments after the debates where she was clearly getting along with Angela Rayner, and that kind of made me feel a bit more warmth towards Penny Mordaunt.
Penny Mordaunt is a Doctor Who fan as well,
and she's a Doctor Who fan. Yeah. So there was sort of.
She's like a normal human. I don't agree with her politics.
No.
But she is, the fact that they thought she was too woke.
Yeah. Of all the people standing on the stages,
she's just a normal person.
Yeah. Of all the people standing on the stages, waiting to be knocked out or fearing they were going to be knocked out, she was the one who looked least like a rabbit in the headlights, and the most like just a human being standing with other human beings.
I'd be scared of the Tory party led by someone like Mordaunt. I don't think they're going to go that way, but I'd be scared that if they actually copped on and got themselves a Cameron, which is where
she had genuine charisma and genuine presence, and the ability to, she was the one that was sent out when Liz Truss was hiding under a desk. And she did, for all that, she did quite well. I don't like her politics, but then she's a Tory, so I wouldn't expect her to be a Marxist.
No. I don't like her politics, but I don't dislike her politics in the same way as, say, Badenoch. She goes on about woke agendas, and she's proper, cultural warrior, and that's the line that anyone who's on that end, and then Braverman's even further west than that.
But then I question the hope you'd have is because Starmer's speech, Starmer's number 10 speech, was really good. It was basically making a bid for boring politics, for calmer politics. It was kind of doing what Corbyn was talking about when he got in, but wasn't very successful at. But Starmer's in charge. He's got a massive party behind him. If all the Labour Party does that kind of thing, and the best moments from the night, I actually warmed to Rishi Sunak when he was giving his concession speech. I kind of, the person I didn't warm to was Liz Truss, because she just kept on with the conspiracy theories. But Jeremy Hunt, Rishi Sunak, once they stopped campaigning, once they've stopped being like, well, frankly, lying, and once they're actually human, I actually, that's what I quite liked about them. I sort of felt genuine sympathy towards them. And I think I'm hoping that kind of, at least in the short term, relays itself into Parliament. And I'm hoping that either influences who becomes the Tory leader or how they act when they are Tory leader.
Well, the thing is, Badenoch and Braverman are both going to go for it. The fact that there is this sort of racist element within the Tory party, I think, means that I don't think either of them would get it, assuming that it goes to the membership. The parliamentary party might put those two names forward, but I can't see the membership voting for either of those two if there's another option instead. So unless it is just those two that go to the sort of wider membership, who else can it be? Sorry?
Mark Francois survived quite comfortably.
Do we think the membership, though, because the membership isn't Tory voters, is it? So there's obviously a tranche of dark subterranean Tory voters who are racist. And that's obvious. You've seen them out on the campaign.
The problem with the members is they're Aaron Banks entryists. That Aaron Banks and Nadine Dorries.
Yes.
Sort of. Aaron Banks said, "Look, I want to get all these guys to, if you want to get Brexit done, go and join the Tory party," and they all did, and they're all still there as far as I can tell.
So they're not. That's not necessarily a bunch of racists, though. That might be a bunch of,
but also
Braverman fans.
But I think
a lot of them will be naturally quite racist and reactionary.
And that's it. It's not about being racist. Brexit. It's about being traditionalist and about seeing somebody as brown skin as being against the traditions, isn't it? You would naturally, even if you don't consider yourself racist, you'd probably naturally lean towards what you inherently think of as traditional white.
I mean, they might not think of themselves as racist.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people do? You'd have to be a full-on, Nazi skinhead to go, I am a racist and I know I'm racist, I don't care. Most people live in a sort of area of denial about their racism.
I wonder if Braverman has been around for long enough and said what they like for long enough for them to just, not see it.
Possibly.
And just go for it.
Yeah. I could see that. But I do, Let's talk happy things.
I think are we all in agreement they're going to go mad before they cop on?
It's hard to say, but it feels like a lot of the more sensible ones from further up the ladder have fallen, and a lot of the madder ones from further up the ladder are still around. And so it does feel.
That just says the way to get Reform vote back is to be Reform. Be mad and Reform. And Badenoch does that, and she also has been very anti-reform in a canny way. So
let's end by
scare all the horses.
Right, let's end by talking about the Labour Party. Then 5 years in Parliament, they've made lots of very conservative promises about things they're not going to do really, and made sort of wider claims about things they will do without necessarily a lot of meat on the bone about how it's all going to be paid for and stuff. I think they've got enough seats that they can be brave, and I'm hoping they will be, because some of the things they've not ruled out, like, he says we're not going to tax the working people, but he didn't rule out taxing non-working people. Rishi Sunak, for example, I read a figure that was put out not for last year because it would have been too recent, so it must have been for the year before, that his income, he actually paid, I think it was 22 or 24% tax on his
it's
entire
22%.
income. 22%, which is
no,
crazy.
I
think Labour can go for those people, and I want them to be brave.
I also think there's lots they can do that don't cost money, like Leveson 2. They can start sorting the sewage out. They've got the energy thing going. There's lots of things that they can just they could release the Russia report. They can there's lots and lots of things they can do that will be quite they're going. But I mean, David Lammy, it's weird, he's disappeared for this campaign and he's back on our airwaves now. And I've always liked David Lammy, and he's just there, and he just gave his little speech about the different wars, support for Ukraine, and then he said, and I'm looking forward to working with the EU to strengthen our ties. It was there in his first little speech. So I mean, the people I've spoken to, and in a bit like with Doctor Who fandom, people that are connected, but you never quite know if you can trust what they're saying. But they're saying the general plan is in season 2 of Labour, in the next Parliament after this one, after they've won another election, that's when the full-on EU stuff's going to really kick in. So they are thinking in terms of 5-year, 10-year plans.
Oh, sure.
That's what you've got to do with Europe anyway.
Well, and that's why it's a good thing that despite the fact that they don't have a huge share of the overall vote, they've got as many seats as they have, because, as I said on the sort of the episode that we did prior to the election, if you've got a massive majority of seats, you can afford to shed a load before you start worrying that somebody else is catching you up. And as things stand, they're 290 odd seats in front of the Conservatives, the nearest next one after. So they've got, so it's the majority they've got is not the majority. What is it, 164 at the last count or whatever overall majority?
Yeah, it's huge.
But but their majority is way bigger than that, because actually the majority that counts in terms of the sort of things that they can put forward is how far ahead of the Conservatives they are, I think. And that's
and lots of these things, the Lib Dems and the Greens will back them anyway. So
exactly.
They've got all that. Yeah. So I mean, I've voted Lib Dem a lot in my life, and so seeing the Lib Dems so healthy is also a nice thing.
I managed to vote a Lib Dem into the constituency, so I am now in a Lib Dem constituency. Pretty much solely because of my vote.
Yeah, I voted Lib Dem last time in this constituency as was, and she used to be the Tory, but she was a nice Tory, and she was so pro-Remain that she was torn apart almost literally by the local Tory party to deselect her, and it ended up it was a big scandal because it ended up with her grown-up daughter just like screaming at all these Gamony men in this room, "Listen to yourself, what are you doing?" Because they were just like, it's almost like they were going to hang her. And then so I voted for her. It's probably the most right-wing I've ever voted, voting for someone who had been a Tory, who then became a Lib Dem, because she was on the front page. She was one of the rebels, people that were purged from the party. So I just thought, I wasn't a big fan of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, and they didn't stand a chance. So so I voted for her. Anyway, it's all
so that's a lovely Labour note to end on.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, me and quite a lot of people just wanted to let her know that we supported her, because she'd been through absolute hell being in the Tory party.
Are we going to score the election?
Do you want to score the election? I mean, for me, it's a sort of 7 out of 10, whereas the sort of first Blair victory was a 10 out of 10. This is a 7. I mean, I am overjoyed at the sort of on the surface result. I think there are a lot of worrying things under the surface. So for me, it's a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, no, I'm not happy about the reform subplot. I think that's necessary. We could have done without it. And no, it's definitely not 1997. We're living in quite scary times. I genuinely think. I don't think we're like, I don't think it's springtime for Hitler or anything. But we are living in scary times with a very scary man in the Kremlin, and a very scary man maybe in the White House, and their guy is now an MP, and I don't like that.
So, Ian, are you going to put a number on it? Because Matt wants you to put a number on this.
Oh, okay. I probably would say 7 out of 10 because I wasn't like. Generally, it's very shallow. It's quite a shallow majority. Like somebody was saying, it's like a sandcastle. The next tide, it could all be swept away at the next election. It's not a deep majority.
Right, Ian, I said 45 minutes. Let's find out what number Matt's going to put
7
on
out
it.
of 10.
I'm going to go with 7 out of 10. So it wasn't a very exciting election, but it's an election to get to the point where Keir Starmer can start doing things rather than being in opposition with people assuming that he's running the country. He can actually run the country, and we can see.
It's a good, it's a good first episode.
Yeah, I just hope
how the season unfolds.
I just hope he does something fairly big and fairly surprising really quickly, because otherwise it's just going to look like more of the same, really. I mean, clearly it won't be more of the same, but unless he does something that makes people sit up and take notice really quickly, he's not gonna get off the ground running, as it were. Anyway, I just want to point out before we go, Sutek has been watching you two for this entire conversation. He's got his eye on you.
Oh, how did Sutek vote?
With his paw, until we do all this again in 5 years, because we're not going to be able to do any more politics podcasts, are we? We're not going to have anything to talk about now. We'll be back in 5 years. Until then, I was JR.
I'm Ian.
I was Matt.
And we will speak again soon.